So as a person that has overseen many exercises and helped move them toward meeting these exercise objectives, what are some of the insights into how the senior leaders looked at situations and worked to make it a decision? And if you could, since I watched you and General Campbell, before the exercise start, work with both the ROC chairman and the USFK commander on building the exercise design to meet those training objectives. If you would please share your insight on that.
Okay, thanks, Bernie. Again, and the advantage of the computer exercises is that, and I'd always tell my soldiers that, hey guys, we're here to train, and when this training is over, we're going to be stronger. But you know, the fact is, doesn't matter how good our unit is. That guy on the computer has an infinite rheostat of friction and difficulty, and we're going to muscle failure. So we're going to go to muscle failure, and don't be ashamed or disappointed when it happens, but know that we will be stronger and more ready when we're done with this. One of my favorite parts of the exercise was the ability to sit next to these 4-star commanders, the CFC, USFK, UNC commander, and have that chat in the morning as we would update him. Generally, that was about 06 in the morning, and we would go over the previous night's activities, what happened, where we are in the exercise, what's going well, what's not going well, and we would make the appropriate tweaks or adjustments in order to tease out the training objectives that commander wanted to have that day. In attendance with that meeting also was his deputy commander, the ROC 4-star. So you found a very special relationship, from an insider's perspective, very special relationship between the CFC commander and his ROC deputy commander, and that's a very important relationship. The other relationship, perhaps even more important, was that with his counterpart, which was the ROC chairman, the ROC KCS chairman. And the ROC deputy CFC commander was a good go-between that would make sure the two of them were always linked. But there was generally a daily phone call. They would frequently have lunch together. And what I'm trying to transmit here is personal relationships matter, and they matter big time in a combined environment like this. And I was always very pleased to see the close relationships and how these men worked through really, truly difficult problems. And I'll talk about one of those a little bit later. They also used their components. So when I say their components, the CFC commander, once he was activated, he would rely heavily on his Army component, his Air Force component, Navy, Marine, and he would always encourage component to component commander dialogue. And generally he had 2 meetings in the day. The first meeting was primarily the staff focused. As mentor, we would always try to make sure that the staff didn't see that as an opportunity to stop the fight and just brief the commander. But ideally, they're tracking the same things they're going to brief him, and so they don't lose a step in the fight. They don't lose the fight at all. They continue the exercise. It's brevity. It's telling the commander what he needs to hear in a form that is meaningful to him. In a combined environment, when you have a language barrier, you learn to make slides that use pictures and tell a story, as opposed to having to use a lot of words and do simultaneous or sequential translation. That's time, and you don't have that. And the other good technique was we saw flip-flopping. So one day the US side would do that brief, and the next day the ROC side would do it. So it went back and forth. The briefing that normally occurred in the end of the day was with the commander and his components, and it was minimal staff, maximize components, making their assessments of where they were in the fight. And again, we would give the commander vision. So he really knew, what the force ratios were, where units were. He knew where the problems. And it was interesting to see how some of them, when the staff would tell him one thing, like, sir, we're at 90%, and he knows that they're down to 67%. And how do you tease that to get the staff to dig a little deeper and find ground truth? That was a particularly vulnerable area with battle damage assessment, when we think we did more damage to the enemy than we really did. Another very useful technique was the battlefield circulation. And what I mean by that is the commander would leave the main command post when we were at the command post Tango, and he would go out to the components and continue he would visit them and continue to monitor the fight from their positions. Again, face-to-face, building trust, building relationships. But the more subtle opportunity here was his deputy ROC commander, and especially when he did the circulation, when he knew there was going to be a pretty significant event happening, it gave the deputy commanders at echelon the opportunity to grab the steering wheel and make decisions. And he would support those decisions, and that was always very effective. So and again, that's training your battle buddy to be able to take over the fight. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Bernie, I think if that didn't cover your question, please feel free.
No, that was outstanding. Of course, it shocks me to discover that staffs didn't have complete command of the facts and perfect situational awareness all of the time.
Certainly when you were the secretary.
We're gonna take questions later. I've got a couple more, but just received a question from another mentor of ours and former USFK, CFC, and UNC commander, General John Tillelli. So I want to combine it with a question I had. And his question was, please address the complexities of combined warfare with multinational forces. And I want you to add that to, and without getting into any classified areas, could you tell us some of the most challenging problems CFC and other commands like UNC faced, and your observation on how they resolved them?
That's a real easy question, of course. And I thank you, General Tillelli, and yourself for that is not a softball. That's a fastball high and tight. But I mean, things that come to mind, TPI, third party intervention. And I would always say that it's not something you can ever prevent. At best, you shape it, but sometimes our ROC ally would think you could prevent it and wish it away. The thing that strikes me the most, though, was again the UNC commander. You know, he owns the armistice. He owns the DMZ. Back in the day, he had a brigade-sized formation that basically assisted. It was a combined formation, ROC and US, and they basically patrolled 160 miles by roughly 2.5 mile wide DMZ, and so they could keep pretty good eyes on the situational awareness of what was going on there. Fast forward to now we've got about 50 US soldiers there, and so the UNC's commander's personal eyes to know what's going on inside of the DMZ and get awareness of an event when it happens. He gets it from ROC JCS, of course, who has ROC units manning the entire DMZ. So in 2010, we had the sinking of the Chunam. We had shelling of Waipido that November. We had the box mines, you know, in 2015. We had a series of things that were happening by the north. And frankly, the Korean domestic population, my sensing, was not satisfied with the firmness of the response by their military to basically break the cycle of provocations. And so, you know, the ROCs also have senior mentors, and we developed a relationship. And we had to work very hard when there was an event that occurred to work with our allies so that we certainly always recognize the opportunity and the requirement for self-defense. But there's a point where self-defense ends and punishment, or get even, or show how strong we are, begins. And that was very delicate because we're talking about, you know, nationalism and sovereignty. And it was our soldier that was hurt, our two NCOs that had limbs blown off. And so you get into this proportionality thing, and is the threat still there? The senior mentors worked that. The CFC commander and the ROC JCS chairman worked that piece. And we were able to understand and come up with a procedure, bilateral operational planning teams when we had an event, so that we can understand both sides of the equation and come to a solution that was meaningful for both of our countries and acceptable. So, and again, if I didn't answer General Tillelli's question or yours, but that was the example, that particular one of the 6 years I did the exercise business with CFC. We didn't solve that in the first meeting. That took several reattempts to try to break through and get through all of the, you know, the emotionalism that was involved in that situation, and work something out with our ally. Because clearly, it wasn't about the North Koreans trying to hurt two soldiers. It was about the North Koreans trying to push a wedge in the alliance and get us to argue with each other, because ultimately that's what he wants more than anything else, is to cause a fissure in the alliance. Over.
Yeah, really good insight. And that, the whole box mine incident and the proximity to the exercise following your comments on that are right on. And, everyone was kind of manning their battle stations at that time. And so, General Scaparrotti would tell you that the exercise became real world. And, we continued with the exercise, but we also had the additional, kind of fog and friction of that event that really gave us additional training opportunities.
Hey, Ernie, let me just jump in. You're talking about tension. You're exactly right. And frankly, during that exercise, I always had my passport in my pocket, and I had some Korean money because you didn't know what was going to happen.